All right, everybody. Welcome to Two Ball, Two Bold, episode 6. I am Marshon Parker.
I'm Nathan Tomlin.
We want to welcome you guys all back. Like I said, episode 6. I think we have a pretty good episode here. Um, we are going to be talking about the retirement of a long-standing quarterback that spent the bulk of his career here in Georgia. We're going to talk about Matt Ryan, who retired on April 22nd. Spent 15 years total in the NFL, 14 of those years with the Falcons. I've been in Georgia for 8 years myself, 8.5 years actually. And I've always found it to be pretty despicable how Falcon fans have always treated him and looked at him. I just want to, Falcon fans won't do it, so I'm going to give Matt Ryan his flowers right now, okay? So, first and foremost, you can't really tell a story about Matt Ryan without talking about the story of Michael Vick. Michael Vick is by far one of the biggest Georgia athletes, and not just football players, but just athletes in Georgia. I mean, he turned people who weren't football fans into football fans because he was just excitement. So losing him we won't go into details about what happened with him. I think anybody who's a sports fan who's going to watch this show understands what happened there, but you can kind of start it out by they had a terrible season, when everything transpired with Michael Vick. And they were just downtrodden. Like the future just looked terrible because you lose this exciting quarterback who had just signed a $100 million contract not that far away from when all his troubles transpired. Then you get Matt Ryan with the third pick in the first round of 2008 draft. He was known as a very good quarterback at Boston College, but a bit turnover prone, right? I guess you say almost like a Sam Darnold type. Um, and you look at his career with the Falcons, and it's the thing that baffles me so much is not only did he save the franchise, but when you look at the Falcon franchise in total, this isn't a franchise that has had a lot of success. Matt Ryan, like I said, 15 seasons, 14 of those seasons with the Falcons. His last season was with the Colts. He had 62,000 career yards, over 380 touchdowns, 4 Pro Bowls, 1 All-Pro, MVP, Offensive Player of the Year, and Offensive Rookie of the Year. And when you go, we've talked about this before. I'm not a huge stat geek, right? I think that stats don't tell the whole story. But when you look at those numbers, those are impressive. But the other impressive things is this: when you look at this, the Falcons under his leadership, they won 3 division titles. Do you know how many division titles the Falcons as a franchise have won? 6.
Yeah,
So he's
seven, wasn't it?
I'm pretty sure it's 6.
It's a six. Okay, I
Uh,
know it's not.
yeah,
I know it's not many more than the three that he
yeah,
won.
two in the NFC West.
Mhm.
And trust me, I remember the '98 season because they were in the NFC West, and that was the Dirty Bird
Mhm.
year. So
Mhm.
he's won half of their division titles.
Mhm.
They have been to the playoffs 14 times as a franchise, 6 of those times under Matt Ryan. They obviously went to 1 Super Bowl without him, 1 Super Bowl with him. We know what happened and transpired in the Super Bowl that he played in, 28-3. But when you look at the franchise as a whole, we're not talking about the Steelers. We're not talking about the Cowboys. We're not talking about the
Mhm.
49ers. We're not talking about the Patriots. We're not talking about one of these franchises who's experienced a lot of success. Matt Ryan, the success that he had in his 14 years with the Falcons, basically, for the most part, almost matches what the franchise did is its totality without him. So for my whole time being in Georgia and him to be just constantly, even in his MVP season, Falcons didn't really give him any respect. It baffles me. He is by far the best quarterback the franchise has ever had. And unless, Michael Penix turns into the next thing, he's probably going to be the best quarterback that the franchise has had for the very, very foreseeable future. Um, so, with all that being said, is Matt Ryan a Hall of Famer?
Look, this is a good question. It's a question that has to be had, right? Um, I wanted to point out too about not even just in the playoffs, but right. So they had 42 years as a franchise prior to Matt Ryan, and 2 years so far since. So that's 44 years, right? So he made the playoffs almost half the time. Before that, they're making it 1 out of every 5.5 years, so 2 out of every 11 years. That's pretty incredible. He went to 2 NFC title games. The franchise outside of him went to 2,
Mhm.
right? So even that, 2 out of the 14 years, he went to the Final Four. Um, and let's be real, they weren't known for their defense. I mean, you can look at their defensive ranks. Um, they weren't a top. They had one of the worst defenses in the league that year. They went to the Super Bowl. It showed in the end of the Super Bowl, but they were ranked like 25th or 26th or something like that in points allowed. I'm not even talking about yards. I don't care about yards. Points allowed, but of course they had the number one offense that year. Um, eh, yeah, I mean that 2016 season was special. MVP, pointing out, Offensive Player of the Year, first team All Pro. He won 120 games in 14 years. That's
Yeah.
almost 10. That's just shy of 10 wins a season. It's again 16 game seasons. Um, I know you're not a stat geek, but I'm going to put out some stats here that are just absolutely eye popping. Okay, 62,792 yards.
Yeah.
Currently, that is seventh in NFL history. 381 touchdowns would be ninth. He is, if you're a quarterback rating guy, he's 19th,
Hmm.
93.6. They don't, QBR is too new, so they don't really rank that over the course of a career. It's a year to year stat. Completion percentage, 13th all time. Interception percent, 21st. Game winning drives. So game winning drives are considered drives in the fourth quarter when you are tied or losing, and it's the drive that puts you ahead and you stay ahead. He had
Hmm.
46, which is sixth in NFL history. He had 38 comebacks. So a comeback is a fourth quarter drive when you're losing that results in a score to tie or take the lead and your team wins or ties. Um, fourth all time in comebacks, which Matty Ice,
Yeah.
right? Um, but as I said in earlier episodes, it's hard when you look at numbers and compare numbers across eras.
Yes.
So numbers across the season. If you like again that 2016 season, you compare against other quarterbacks. He was the best quarterback that year, and it,
Hmm.
and it showed. And he won the accolades that go with it. Um, all pros and Pro Bowls, to me, are a good judge of how a player is against his contemporaries. And let's be real, he played in the golden age quarterbacks.
Yes.
You had the top 3 quarterbacks all time in touchdowns and passing yards that he came in, slightly after, 10 years after Peyton, 7, 8 years after Brady, and but 6 years after Breeze.
Hmm.
And then along with, right around the same time as Rodgers, a couple years after Rodgers, I think. He only made 4 Pro Bowls. And
Yes.
again, he did have Drew Brees and Aaron Rodgers in the NFC during those years. Cam Newton had a 4 or 5 year span where Cam Newton was, you know, he
The
won the MVP.
force.
He won the MVP the year prior to Matt Ryan.
Yeah.
Um, the one MVP, only one first team All Pro. It pains me to say this.
Hmm.
I don't think he makes it. Now he is the ultimate Falcon,
Hmm.
right? Um, he's the Hall of Very, Very Good.
Hmm. Hmm.
He is on. His number will be retired by the Falcons. They'll probably do it this year. To be honest, they
Yeah.
should anyway. They should have a ceremony against a team that they know they're going to beat too.
Yeah.
Stop
Exactly. Yeah.
stop doing stuff like the Lakers do and have Kobe statue when you play the defending champions. Um, but I don't think he's a Hall of Famer. And again, I think he was severely underrated.
Hmm.
And that may have had a lot to do with Pro Bowls because Pro Bowls is a lot of fan voting.
Yeah.
But All Pro is it's hard for
Yes.
quarterbacks. There's only 2, And again, Peyton Manning and Tom Brady are considered by most to be top 5 quarterbacks of all time.
Mm-hmm.
And Aaron Rodgers is probably right in there too. You played with 3 of arguably the top 5, we'll say top 10, and I feel like we can be very comfortable saying that. And Drew Brees is
Top
in
20, top
that
15.
all time.
Yeah.
There are 29 quarterbacks in the Football Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm.
There are 6 guys that are currently retired, not playing, that either are locks or have arguments.
Yeah.
I think there are 3 first ballot Hall of Famers, in my opinion, 2 guaranteed. Brady and Brees are for sure first ballot Hall of Famers. Ben Roethlisberger is, I think, in my opinion, should be.
Yes.
He'll definitely get in. Whether he's first ballot or not probably depends on the other guys on the ballot that particular year. And then the 3 that have cases, and I think that where you have to compare Matt Ryan to, would be Eli Manning and Philip Rivers. Those, we've had a conversation about Eli Manning before and how we feel about that. I don't feel like, again, you can't take 10 quarterbacks out of 32 and put them in the Hall of Fame. That dilutes the Hall of Fame and it takes away meaning.
Yeah.
So I don't think he is. I do think a great career. I don't think he gets in.
Listen, so now mind you, we, obviously we talk about what we're going to talk about, but we don't go too deep into detail because we kind of want to be able to have an organic conversation. So going into this, I didn't know what you were going to say. And I can tell you, I'll say a few things, because I think we both agree that Philip Rivers should be in the Hall of Fame, right? So one thing I found interesting was Philip Rivers is 5-7 in the playoffs. That tells that means he was in playoffs a lot, right? 8 Pro Bowls, doesn't have so he's got double the Pro Bowls, 63,000 yards, 421 touchdowns. So from a statistics standpoint, he's more impressive than Matt Ryan. I personally think Philip Rivers is a better quarterback, just just in general. It's so funny because I had a feeling you were going to have the same outlook on this as me, and you did to the T. Whereas I don't think he's Hall of Famer. I literally said in my head, he's in the Hall of Very Good, But this is where, you as my podcasting partner, I was getting you right where I wanted to get you because I knew you were going to have the same line of thinking as me. So this is the question I have, because this is the question that I ponder, is if they win that Super Bowl, do we look at him different? Do we then look at him different, and are we then saying he's a Hall of Famer? Because if so, how twisted is our logic that one game then changes the whole career of a gold jacket or no gold jacket? But what do you think?
Well, look, I think that's a double-edged question because of how they lost the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
How they lost the Super Bowl, and it's still haunting your coach to this day.
Yeah.
And it follows him. And every time they lose a close game, especially if they have a lead, even if it's a 3-point lead late.
Yeah.
Although they've had double-digit leads in the fourth quarter. Granted, against Mahomes, but still. That gets brought up,
Yeah.
One of those I do, if you look at the stats of the Super Bowl, okay, and you actually you watch the game, and you look at this and you say, look, if they win, is he the Super Bowl MVP? Probably not. He's the offensive MVP, but Alford had the 82-yard pick six.
Yeah.
Grady Jarrett had 3 sacks as a
Yeah.
defensive tackle. The pressure they were putting on Brady early in the game was the difference. And when you
Hmm.
watch that game for the first, what was it, 40 minutes of the game, the defense of Atlanta, which I talked about was like one of the worst in the league,
They were balling.
built that lead. And the
Sideline to
offense just did
sideline.
what
They
they
were
always
balling.
did.
Hmm.
It's a tough question. I do think he probably does end up getting in because I do think him and Philip Rivers are very close. And
Yeah.
to your point, Matt Ryan had a couple years that were better than any of the years Philip Rivers had, but I think Philip Rivers was consistently better.
Agree.
Hence the 8 Pro Bowls
Hmm.
versus the 4 for Matt Ryan. Rivers never won an MVP, never made an All-Pro. I think never made an All-Pro. I don't even think he made a second team All-Pro.
No.
So, and again, he had to play with Peyton Manning and Tom Brady in the AFC. So if he made it, he was the third guy,
Yeah.
right? Peyton and Tom made it every year. They weren't hurt. And then Andrew Luck, came in and he was balling. Golden Age quarterbacks, like I said, I think that's a tough question. I think he probably gets in
Hmm.
if they win that game and it doesn't end up being close. If they
Well,
hold
and
that lead and they win that game by
yeah.
2, 3, 4 scores,
Yeah.
I think he is. But if that game got really close
Yeah.
and they just held on by the skin of their teeth, I don't think he gets in.
And I think one thing we learned is if I think one thing we've learned is that if there's a chance for the quarterback to get the Super Bowl MVP, he's going to get it. Like it's tie
Mm-hmm.
goes to the runner, right? If the
Mm-hmm.
quarterback played a good game, because there's been times like, to be honest, the first Super Bowl between the Chiefs and the 49ers, I don't know that Patrick Mahomes deserved the MVP. I thought Williams, the running back, deserved it. And
Mm-hmm.
if it's close, they're going to give it to the quarterback. So I do believe Matt Ryan would have had a Super Bowl MVP and a ring under his belt, and that would have
And
totally changed the trajectory
mm-hmm.
of his career and how we look at him. But as of now, I mean, yeah, I think we both agree that he's in the Hall of Very Good, which is better than most. I mean, if a guy can have a career where he doesn't necessarily get a gold jacket, but his number gets retired and he's one of the franchise leaders of all time in statistics and notoriety, and it's kind of like when you think of that franchise's history, you think of him.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm pretty sure that 90% of the league would take that. I mean, the Hall of Fame,
Yeah.
look, people have their gripes with Deion Sanders, and I get it, whatever. I've never really had a problem with players who talk a lot, especially if they can back it up. To
Mm-hmm.
me, it's just a part of the entertainment, of the sports that we watch. But when Deion Sanders said what he said, which is, hey, if they're gonna start letting all these guys in, and they got to create another wing where they keep guys like me in it. I
Mm-hmm.
I get it. I totally understand it because guys like a Deion Sanders, a Aaron Donald, a Jerry Rice, a Barry Sanders, a Walter Payton, Tom Brady. These are the elite of the elite. They are the 1% of the 1%. And if we get to a point where we're literally going to start letting guys in, you know, I don't know that Kurt Warner should have been in, but if we're going
Mm-hmm.
to just start letting, and it's funny because Kurt Warner is going to come up a little bit later as an example for another player, but I mean, the Hall of Fame is supposed to be cut and dry. It's supposed to be that guy. As soon as you think about him, he is. There's no doubt. If you have to think
Mm-hmm.
about it, it's almost like that guy doesn't deserve to be in.
Right.
But transition into a new topic, which I thought was pretty interesting for us to discuss is uh, over or under on quarterbacks who are currently on rosters now who we believe will be in the Hall of Fame. Now I put that number at 5.5, and
Okay.
I'll ask you, did did you go over that number or did you go under that number?
So 5.5, I'm going under.
Okay, I did too,
Okay.
and Yeah, so for me, I had five guys, and I'll break it down, and I'd love to hear because there's a great chance we're going to have two guys that we definitely agree on. If we don't, then we've got bigger problems, right? But I have five guys. Look, Patrick Mahomes could we could get an alert on our phone right now that says Patrick Mahomes said he's done with football. He wants to
Hmm.
try baseball, or he wants to move to another country or do he's in the Hall of Fame like right now.
Hmm.
He's 28. He's got three Super Bowls. He's not even a guy that you have to run numbers down, but nonetheless, he's got three Super Bowls, three MVPs, Super Bowl MVPs, two MVPs, six Pro Bowls, two first team All Pros, one second team All Pro. I have said over and over again for the last couple of years, I think he's the greatest quarterback that has ever played. The number two guy is Aaron Rodgers. I'm not even going to waste our time by going through stats with him. He's Aaron Rodgers. Um, number three is somebody who personally I don't know that he should, but he will be in. Lamar Jackson. He's 27 years old. He's had two MVPs, two first team All Pros, three Pro Bowls. Uh, there has not been a quarterback in the history of the NFL who has two or more MVPs who's not in the Hall of Fame. And you have to figure, is he still in his prime? He might get one more MVP, and if he gets one more MVP, he's definitely in. He may even get a Super Bowl under his belt. He's going to end his career as the all-time rushing leader for quarterbacks. But those two MVPs, I think that and the way he bends a field, that's going to get him in. So that's three guys. Um, you might have thought that I would say my guy who's I think is the second best quarterback in the league right now, Josh Allen would, but I think Josh Allen is going to ultimately end up falling in the Cam Newton bucket or the Matt Ryan bucket of the Hall of Very Good. But I specifically say the Cam Newton bucket because I think I just don't know what he's going to look like at 30, 31. I mean, that dude
Hmm.
he's big, he's huge, he's a tank, but Cam Newton was a tank. By the time
Hmm.
Cam Newton was 30, his body was done. And I think Josh Allen, I'm not wishing this on him because I don't wish anything bad on any of these athletes. I want them to, get paid and do what they do best as long as they can. But I don't see Josh Allen having a very long career. So for me, the fourth guy would be Justin Herbert, who he's stat geeks love Justin Herbert. I mean,
Hmm.
the analytics guys they start sweating when they think about Justin Herbert. And from a statistics standpoint, he's got that, and then he's got coming in Harbaugh, and Harbaugh's a winner. And so
Hmm.
I think what happens with Harbaugh is that'll take care of the winning piece that he's missing, while he's still going to be a very high statistic quarterback. And he's a big kid. I mean,
Hmm.
he's 26 years old. He could play another 10 years. I don't think he's had any significant injuries in both the pros or in college. And so I can definitely see him being the fourth guy. And then for me, the fifth guy, and this is obviously, you know, he's only played 1 year. But if I had to pick a guy that I say, okay, based on the rookie season, based on the way that they did roster building and the way that it looks like his career may go, I picked CJ Stroud.
Hmm.
Um, some of the other guys we can go more in depth, but I'd love to hear what you say because you might bring them up and then we can engage in conversation there. But my five guys were gun to my head. I'm saying Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Aaron Rodgers, Justin Herbert, and CJ Stroud.
Gotcha. So I'm going to give you some numbers here.
Hmm.
I talked about it. There's 29 quarterbacks in the NFL Hall of Fame,
Yes.
all time.
Yes.
Okay. It includes guys that before the Super Bowl era. Do you know how many of the 29 quarterbacks never won a championship? And I say championship because you have guys that didn't play in Super Bowls,
Yeah.
so they won NFL or AFL championships. You know how many there were?
I'm going
It,
to say
throw a number
five.
out. Close. There's five that never won a Super Bowl, and then Y.A. Tittle never won a championship. Listen, but listen to who the five are. So you have Y.A. Tittle, the pre-Super Bowl. He made
Mhm,
three first-team All-Pros, seven Pro Bowls, started
mhm,
13 years as the primary starter. Jim Kelly,
Yeah.
who made 4 Super Bowls, just
Never
lost all
happened
of
again.
them. Made a first-team All-Pro again, and went as 11 years as the starting quarterback. And when I say that, starting over half the games. Think about that for a second. Who the quarterbacks were when Jim Kelly was a quarterback, right? John Elway, Joe Montana, Dan
Hmm.
Marino.
Hmm.
You had other guys that had some good years, but those are 3 of the best quarterbacks that ever played.
Yeah.
And Jim Kelly, and he still snuck in a first-team All-Pro. Warren Moon,
Hmm.
never made an All-Pro, first-team All-Pro. Made 9 Pro Bowls though.
Yeah.
Started 15 years in counting stats. Was when he retired, I think he was second or third all-time in yards. Dan Fouts, who made 2 first-team All-Pros and 6 Pro Bowls. And then 2 of the ultimate counting stats guys when they retired. Fran Tarkenton, 1
Hmm.
first-team All-Pro, 9 Pro Bowls, had the record for yards and touchdowns until Dan Marino, who made 3 first-team All-Pros, 9 Pro Bowls, did go to a Super Bowl, of course, never won.
Yeah.
The average the 29 quarterbacks, the average quarterback in the Hall of Fame has 2 Super Bowl rings
Hmm.
or championships, 2 first team All Pros, and 7 Pro Bowls.
Hmm.
And the average length of time starting was 13 years.
Yeah.
Now, that number is going to about to get skewed drastically because you're going to have Tom Brady, who crushes all those,
Yeah.
and is going to increase that average. Drew Brees only had 1 championship. I don't think he had a first team. I think he had maybe 1 first team All Pro. But the Pro Bowls in this year starting is increasing that. So when you look at that, what guys have it? What guys have 2 Super Bowl rings? There's one. There's one active quarterback that has 2, and that's Patrick Mahomes. Who I agree with you. If he retires right now,
Hmm.
he's in the Hall of Fame. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
And I do want to dig into this a little bit because there are going to be people like, he didn't play long enough. I don't care.
Yeah.
6 years as a starter.
Yeah.
Okay, 6 years, 6 Pro Bowls,
Hmm.
4 Super Bowl appearances, 6 AFC Championship appearances, 3 Super Bowl victories. He has 3 playoff losses
Yeah. Yeah.
in 6 years, 3 Super Bowl MVPs, 2 MVPs, one of 11 players all time with 2 MVPs. Every single one's in the Hall of Fame or will be. 1 Offensive Player of the Year, 2 first team All Pros, 1 second team All Pros. So he's been a top 2 quarterback half the years, and that's the other 3 probably still should have got it. Uh,
Hmm.
4 times been a top 5 Offensive Player of the Year.
Yeah.
First all time in yards per game at 296 yards. Do you know who's second, and do you know how much the yards are? You can probably guess who it is. Yards per game.
And what span?
Yards per game. All time. Think about who threw the ball all the time. Okay. Drew Brees.
Oh, I was about to say Marino. Breeze. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Drew Brees. And 280. So Patrick Mahomes is averaging 16 more yards per game
Yeah.
than the second closest. Already,
Yeah.
already, he's 5th all time in passing touchdowns in the playoffs, and he's 5 away from being behind only Tom Brady.
Yeah.
And the only active player ahead of him is Aaron Rodgers with 1 more. And if we're going to be honest, Aaron Rodgers has maybe 1 or 2 years left.
Yeah.
The Jets may make the playoffs, but is he going to throw more touchdowns than Patrick Mahomes in the postseason? Probably not. He's my first. He's one of. I have 3 first ballot Hall of Famers. He's one of them. Aaron Rodgers is the other.
Mm.
Super Bowl MVP, 4 MVPs. The only player that has 4 other than him is Peyton has 5.
Yeah.
No one else has 4. He has 4 first team All Pros. He has, which is tied for 3rd all time in quarterbacks. 10 Pro Bowls, 7 top 5 offensive player of the years, 5 top 5 MVPs, the lowest interception percentage in NFL history, 1.4% of his passes. He's tied with Jacoby Brissett, okay, who has a fraction of the passes that Aaron Rodgers has.
Yeah.
He's fifth in touchdowns at 475. Um, barring injury, if he stays healthy this year, it's a good assumption in the 17-game season he'll get 25, and he'll be the fourth quarterback to hit 500. The next closest, or the next player that, barring injury, realistically has a shot at 500 is Patrick Mahomes, who has 219. Now, there are other quarterbacks that have more. Stafford and Russell Wilson are in the 300s. They're not getting to
Yeah.
500.
No.
And he's a couple games away from being the ninth quarterback all time to 60,000 yards.
Hmm.
Lock, first ballot.
Yeah.
The other one, and I agree with you, it's Lamar Jackson. Look, 11 players have won 2 MVPs. 11.
Yeah.
If you take away the 3 active players, that leaves 8. If you take away Tom Brady,
Yeah.
who's not yet eligible, the other 7 are all in the Hall of Fame.
Yep.
And Tom Brady, of course, will be in. We already talked about Mahomes and Rodgers. Lamar Jackson is just shooing unless he get. It would take. He would have to get an injury or fall off a cliff.
Yeah.
If he even is barely above league average for another 5 years,
Hmm.
because that would be the only argument against him is, oh, he didn't play long enough.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the playoff failures. If he wins a Super Bowl, that immediately he's in,
Yeah.
100%, and there's no stopping. One guy who we've talked about in the past who may get in,
Hmm.
but I don't think he will,
Hmm.
is Russell Wilson.
Yeah.
And again, if you look, he has no first team All Pros. He has 1 Super Bowl ring. He has no first team All Pros. He does have 9 Pro Bowls.
Yeah.
He was at 1 second team All Pro. He's three times has finished in the top 5 offensive player of the year. But I don't think he gets in. His counting stats aren't that great.
Mhm.
You could argue, and I think successfully, no fault to his own, he was carried by that defense. That was his second year in the league that they won the Super Bowl, second or third year. And the year
Yeah.
prior and then the 2 years after, they were either first or second defense in the NFL. They were good because of the defense. He made plays, don't get me wrong. He made plays when he had to and all that. You know well enough. I had to play him twice a year,
Yeah.
sometimes 3 times then. But I don't think he's in. I
No.
really don't. Another guy who the counting stats are blowing off the top, who I guess if he can stay healthy and play 4 more years at the same level he played at last year,
Mhm.
will probably get in because of the longevity and the counting stats, would be Matt Stafford.
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting about Matt Stafford is he's a guy that I think has been severely underrated. He's only made 2 Pro Bowls. He didn't make a Pro Bowl I think it was his second or third year in the league. He threw 41 touchdowns.
Yep. And I think he had 50,
And
50.
they made
Like,
5,000 yards. And they
yeah.
made the playoffs that year.
Yeah.
And he did not make the Pro Bowl.
Yeah.
But he has only 2 Pro Bowl appearances, but he does have a Super Bowl. He has a comeback player of the year, and he finished like 5th last year in comeback player of the year.
Yeah.
But his counting stats, he has 56,000 passing yards right now.
I have that written down. 357 touchdowns, but
350. But what I'm saying is, if he plays 4 more years at the level he played last year, he
yeah.
got about 4,000 yards. If he plays 4 more years, even 3 more years, that puts him close to 70. He'd be top 5 all time in passing yards. And at 20 to 25 touchdowns a year, you're talking about 450 touchdowns.
Yeah.
And the Rams could legitimately be good. They could make some playoff
I like
runs.
the roster. I like that roster.
Okay. He has more game-winning drives than Russ, more clutch than Russell Wilson, more yards and more touchdowns than Russ. So I think it's interesting. I don't think he gets in either. I did want to bring him up, though, because I think him being stuck on Detroit, and it worked twofold against him. Number one is he had the best receiver in football in Calvin Johnson.
Yeah.
The other thing is they had nothing else.
They were always there. They were always there.
They were always pretty bad. And it was a terribly run organization.
Yeah.
Um, in terms of the other quarterbacks, I didn't really necessarily pick who I think is going to make it or not because none of them are there yet. But some guys I want to talk about that I think could get there. You mentioned Herbert.
Mhm.
You're right. He's a counting stat king, right?
Yeah.
Until last year, I mean, if he wouldn't have got hurt, he would have over close to 20,000 yards through 4 seasons in the league.
Yeah.
Um,
17,000 yards,
but
114.
he's only made one Pro Bowl through 4 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
One top 10 MVP. Now it's interesting you say that about Harbaugh with the winning. If they do turn around and start winning, it will help. But with Harbaugh as his coach, I guarantee you his counting stats are going to decline because Harbaugh is a run guy. Which probably will help them win, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
But it's going to make his numbers drop. You mentioned C.J. Stroud. I mean, it's way too early, obviously, but
Yeah.
if 1 year is an indication, he finished 8th in MVP voting as a rookie quarterback in the NFL. That's
Yeah.
stupid.
Yeah.
Already won a playoff game. To your point, their roster is fantastic. He led the league in interception percentage, 1% of his passes, 5 picks and 499 passes. That's phenomenal for a
Yeah.
rookie. Absolutely phenomenal. Um, Josh Allen, you talked about. I kind of agree with you. He only has 2 Pro Bowls.
Yeah.
He has
Yeah.
one. He has one second team All Pro, and if you look at his numbers and compare them to Patrick Mahomes, he got that because that year he ran for 700 yards and had like 8 rushing touchdowns. So he had like more total touchdowns. But Mahomes had a better year than Josh Allen.
Yeah.
Um, he's had 3 top 5 MVPs though.
Yeah.
So if he can break through and win one or two, and to your point too, I think they got to win a Super Bowl.
Mhm.
He has a legitimate shot, but I agree with you about his body. And now the roster does not look good.
No, they
So
tore it.
the winning and his stats I think are going to take a hit, and that's for the foreseeable future. I
Mhm.
don't, I we'll see, but there were 4 other quarterbacks I did want to mention. I'm surprised you didn't mention this guy, and
And
I
I'm
think you didn't.
because I knew you were, and I want to have a conversation about that. But go ahead.
And I think you didn't because of injury. Is Joe Burrow when he's healthy?
Hmm.
He's as good as anyone but Mahomes, in my opinion.
I think Allen's
Right,
better.
right
But
now, right now. No, I would take Joe. If Joe Burrow's healthy,
yeah.
I'd rather have Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow wins. Josh Allen doesn't, and I don't care what you want. And he has no offensive line. Their defense, I don't think, was any better than the Bills' defense. The 2 years he was healthy, for the
Hmm.
full year, they made the AFC Championship game.
Yeah.
Once they won and went to the Super Bowl,
Yeah.
and the other one they lost against Patrick Mahomes. He has one Pro Bowl. Again, he's only played 2 healthy years. He won a
Yeah.
comeback player of the year,
Yeah.
his second year in the league, where he led the league in completion percentage and yards per attempt. Went to the Super Bowl and finished top 5 in MVP in his first full year as an NFL quarterback. Um, this one's interesting, and the end of last year really kind of hurts this argument.
Mhm.
Jalen Hurts, the start. If you really look at the start of his career, it started out very, very good. He's 33-14 as a starter, other than that first year where he started the last couple of games where they were really tanking. 2 Pro Bowls, a second team All Pro, a top 2 MVP, which he had the MVP locked up and faded down the stretch.
Yeah.
And he was top 3 offensive player of the year that year. Went to the Super Bowl and was phenomenal in the
Yeah.
Super Bowl. I'll be honest with you, I think he was the best player on the field in the Super Bowl. I think he was. He had that fumble. That was it.
Hmm.
Other than that, he played better than anybody. Um, Dak Prescott, because of if he plays, listen, the way he played, listen to me, the way he played last year,
Hmm.
if he does that a few more years, he's got 33,000 yards. He plays like that for a few more years, dude. Look, man, he is an offensive rookie of the year. The Cowboys have a decent roster this year. They don't have a running back. I
Yeah.
don't know if they're going to necessarily do much this year, but they do have good pieces around him. He's going to put up yards. He's got CeeDee Lamb's a stud receiver.
I agree with that.
Mike McCarthy likes to throw the ball.
Hmm.
He likes to throw the ball to run it. Right? He's one of those kind of coaches. So you're going to throw the ball more.
Yeah.
Again, I don't think he gets in, but
Uh-huh.
he's a guy worth talking about who he's had when he's healthy,
Uh-huh.
and especially again coming off his best year of his career, in my opinion. And then the last guy, I can't believe you didn't bring this man up. And again, I know it's extremely early. In 21 games started, he's 17-4.
Yeah.
He's been to 2 conference championship games, 1 Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Finished 3rd in offensive rookie of the year voting despite not playing the full year.
Hmm.
This past year finished 4th in MVP voting, 6th in offensive player of the year, made a Pro Bowl, and led the league in QBR, touchdown percentage, yards per attempt, yards per completion, and quarterback rating if you want to go by the old rating scale.
Yeah.
Your quarterback, Brock Purdy.
Do
Look,
you want me?
man.
Yeah. Do you want me to tell you
Look,
why?
man.
I'll let you talk, and then I'll tell you why I didn't bring him up.
This guy, and then his story adds more to it, right? Uh, It shouldn't. It shouldn't matter where someone's drafted,
Yeah.
but it does. Like people bring that up about Tom Brady all the time. Still, that
Yeah.
was 25 years ago that man got drafted, and they
Mhm.
still bring that up. Brock Purdy is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. It's hard to argue that.
Yeah.
The success, team success, and personal success are both there. They have a roster. They're
Mhm.
going to continue to be good. They're going to continue to win games. With this roster, they got to win.
Yeah.
We could have a whole other conversation on the window they have to really win with Purdy before they're in a salary cap hell. But man, I'm shocked you didn't bring him up.
So, a few things. I didn't bring him up because there's a few differences. So, we are so cynical now. The Tom Brady story came at a time where we rooted for the underdog,
Mhm.
right? And then even when you look at what Tom Brady had to do to overcome that, like even 2 Super Bowls in, people were saying, is it him or is it the defense? Like he had to win, was it 7 rings, right? He's won 7 rings. And by like ring, I don't think he really got credit until ring 3 or 4. Now, so by ring 4, people said, okay, he's the guy, right? And I think now we've become even more cynical. I think that Brock Purdy is never, he won't make the Hall of Fame. He'll never get the credit he deserves because there's been too many, and this is important because it's important to the media and how they view you and how they talk
Mhm.
about you has a lot to do with how the overall grand scheme of people talk about you. It's the reason why I say in the last 30 years, 20, 30 years, Skip Bayless is one of the 3 biggest sports figures because he was the first hot take guy to kind of shift the way people, you never heard people say clutch gene and stuff like that before Skip Bayless. Now everybody's talking about clutch gene and all these other things that you just didn't hear before. So many people in the media have dug in, and I don't see them changing their views because typically when people dig in like that, they don't change their views. They wait until something validates their views, so then they can say,
Mhm.
I told you, I told you. I just don't see the way the outlook has been shifted for us to look at Brock Purdy. I
Mhm.
He would have to win 3 or 4 or 5 Super Bowls before people start to talk about him differently. Because if he gets 1 or 2, it's still going to be, well, look at the roster. Well, 50, I mean, there was a
Mhm.
story that just came out yesterday where a media guy said 15 other quarterbacks could have did what Brock Purdy did. That narrative is not going to change, and when these narratives sticks to you, it impacts you. It impacts how many all pros you get. It impacts if you're a Hall of Famer. It impacts the overall way that people see you. So that's the reason I didn't bring him up. I'm just resolved in understanding that Brock Purdy is never going to get all the credit he should get. And
Mhm.
people don't like the whole American underdog story anymore. They don't want that. They don't want it anymore. But but
Well,
but but I'll tell you this about Burrow. There's 2 reasons I didn't bring up Burrow because I love, but we've talked about this before. I love Joe Burrow, but I would say actually 3 things. I think people underestimate how big of a blue chip Jamar Chase is. Jamar Chase is
Mhm.
amazing.
Yeah.
And I mean, Jamar Chase is, you want to talk about Hall of Famer. I think Jamar Chase is going to, unless serious injury, he's going to be Hall of Famer. But the two things, the injuries and the organization. Like
Mhm.
when you go to Cincinnati, you're battling against the organization. You know, when we talked about, when I said what I said our last episode, where I said, hey, the idea of having a whole bunch of draft picks is really overrated because the vast majority of these guys can't draft good. So you
Mhm.
might as well trade up if you can and try to get a blue chip, because your chances of getting in the top five and getting a blue chip guy like Jamar Chase, like Marvin Harrison Jr., who I think is going to be amazing. These guys, you get a better chance of that than if a team's like, we've got 12 draft picks and then they end up drafting, 11 bums, right? I don't trust the organization to continue to build around him. And at this point, I don't trust his lower limbs. I don't trust that he's going to be healthy. I think he's awesome. And he's already, I mean, he's not already, but he's 27. And
Mhm.
I think sometimes we look at Brady and Manning and these guys and we think, oh, well, 27, they're going to play another 10 years. That's not everybody. That's not
Mhm.
every. We thought Cam Newton was going to do that. Cam Newton, by the time, like we said earlier, by the time he was 30, 31, his body was like, I'm done. So some of these guys don't have the longevity. I mean, a 10-year career is awesome.
Yeah.
But to Hall of Fame as a quarterback, you got to have a 15, 16, 18-year career, you know. And he's not going to have that, I don't think. And then again, that organization, they struck gold when they got him with the first pick. And then next year they got, you know, one of the top, maybe end up being top five receivers of this generation in Jamar
Yeah.
Chase. So I don't trust that organization to do what they need to do around him for him to have continued success. But and then at Stanford, don't get me started on that. Stafford, the majority of those yards came because the Lions were always down by 2 scores, and then he was in shotgun the rest of the game, and he would have 450 yards, but they lost by 3 touchdowns. So, that is what it is.
Listen, I mean, I see your point about about Burrow and Purdy, but man, look, it may take Brock Purdy going somewhere else
Now
because
you're
I
trying to
don't know.
take the quarterback away. Come on now.
Well, I'm. Look, they have to do something. I mean, they drafted a receiver.
Yeah.
Something's going on with Debo or Ayuk
Debo's gone. My favorite Niner is going to be gone after next year.
because
I'm resolved with.
I think that's the route they're going to
Yeah,
because since he signed that contract, he has either been injured or underperformed. Whatever a combination of the two, whatever. When he's been
injury.
on the field, I think it's injuries too, but when he's been on the field, he hasn't been performing. Now, is that because of injuries? Probably. But when you pay a guy elite and they're not playing elite, and then you got another guy that's playing elite and you got to start paying him, there's only so much money.
Yeah,
NFL is salary cap is different than other sports.
yeah,
Um, Burrow, I agree. I don't think Burrow. That's why I went with the under 5.5, because I think there are the three that are fireproof,
hmm
with 200%. And look, Lamar Jackson, come on, man. He got two MVPs, you know? And I'll be honest with you, I think Brock Purdy was the MVP leader until they played the Ravens.
yes,
And he had the worst game of his career, and Lamar Jackson balled out. And that changed everything.
hmm
Purdy was going to win the MVP. If Purdy would have balled out that game, they win, and Purdy played really well, Purdy's the MVP. And then you're having a different conversation about, oh, then he doesn't get the credit. Yeah, sure, he does have the best running back in the NFL. He does have a top three tight end. He does have one of the top three or four receiving core in terms of top two wide receivers.
yeah,
He
best
does
player.
have one of the best offensive line. He does have an offensive minded coach that is one of the best offensive coaches in terms of just game planning and best offensive systems. He took from his dad, man. That thing worked 30, 40 years ago. And the fact more people don't use it and revolutionize it like Kyle Shanahan does blows my mind.
Well, the
Um,
Dolphins are
yeah,
they.
but that's from the same tree, though, is my point.
Yeah, yeah,
You know what I'm
yeah.
saying?
That tree is
Like
expanded.
these guys are all together.
Yeah.
you know. But yeah. I mean, to me, it's under. Again, there's only been 29.
Yeah.
You know, include the guys that are retired. There's anywhere from 32 to 35, depending on who makes it,
Yeah.
and that's in the history of the NFL.
Yeah.
That's less than one every 5 years, and most of these guys aren't playing 5 years, so or less than one every 2 or 3 years. So I gotta go. I gotta go under, man.
Yeah. Did you
I
have
gotta go
any?
under.
You have anybody else just listed that you want to just talk about it all?
No, I mean, there's no point talking about rookies because you
Yeah.
don't know. I mean, that's a whole different conversation we'll have. But no, I mean, that was half the quarterbacks in the NFL pretty much that we talked about. You know, but there's nobody right now that's like a fringe Hall of Famer that's at the end of their career that sits on the bench.
No.
You know what I mean?
No.
I mean, the only other active quarterback I think that we didn't talk about that has a Super Bowl is Flacco, if I'm not mistaken. Starting quarterback. There's guys obviously the backups that have some
Yeah.
championships, but I think Flacco's the only other active quarterback with a Super Bowl. He ain't getting it.
No.
You know, he's not. You know, um, but yeah, I mean, I'm good. I think we talked about who we need to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
You know,
interesting. I mean, and especially as we go along, I mean, the term counting stats have come up so many times in this conversation. There's going to be guys who's going to have 65, 70,
mhm.
70,000 yards in their careers over. And then when it's like, are they in the Hall of Fame? We're like, no, they shouldn't be in. It's just the
Yeah.
numbers are just,
Well,
they're
they
good.
have an extra game now.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Now I will say this because look, man, when Dan Marino retired with 60,000 yards, right? And he's still one of 8 guys with 60,000 yards.
Yeah.
Blows my mind. When Dan Marino had 48 touchdowns, that still to this day, to me, is more impressive than when Peyton threw 55.
Oh,
Because
yeah,
you look at what the average quarterback did at that time. You look at the league average, and you say, "Holy smokes!"
yeah,
Like this guy was lapping the field.
yes.
Um, Now I do think if anyone that's getting to 70,000 yards, I think is getting in. I'm sorry. 70,000 is a huge number because to your point, that's the longevity argument.
I'm seeing how
You
close
were
Stafford is. So that's probably about what,
nah,
4
man,
years?
14,000 yards. That's 4 years because he's not getting 5,000 yards a season.
No,
That's
no.
4 healthy years, though. I don't think he's got that. I don't think
It's
he's
gonna be
got it
close. It's gonna be close.
because he's not going to play 17 games in any season. He won't. He gets too injured too much. And
Yeah.
he's older, man.
Yeah, 30, 36. 36, yeah.
And he got 4 years left.
Yeah, and he's made so much money in his career. Why would he want 4 years? I wouldn't be surprised if this is his last year.
It probably depends
If they're
on
good.
injuries. If he gets hurt again, he might hang it up.
If they win
But if
7
he,
games, I think he's just like, whatever, I'm done.
yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, good conversation though. Good
Yeah,
conversation.
yeah, absolutely. So let us know what y'all think too. Over and under 5.5 current quarterbacks in the NFL. They'll make the Hall of Fame. We won't be able to really know until 25 years from now. But hey, it's worth a conversation. See what y'all think. We may find out sooner than that, depending on how guys pan out. But let us know what you think. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again soon.
Take care.